You're listening to an archived Cabral Concept podcast. After listening to this show, check out the most up-to-date podcasts available at stephencabral.com/podcasts or search directly on iTunes. And now, welcome to the Cabral Concept, where board-certified naturopath and integrative health practitioner Dr. Stephen Cabral shares how he was diagnosed at the age of 17 with a life-altering illness and given no hope for recovery. It was only after studying and traveling all over the world did he discover how to combine ancient Ayurvedic healing practices with state-of-the-art naturopathic and functional medicine to fully rebalance the body and re-energize it with life. It's time to discover how to get well, lose weight, and finally feel alive again. And now, here's your host, Dr. Stephen Cabral.
Today's wellness and weight loss show, I want to share with you how going gluten-free could actually be bad for you and your health. So I know it's become very popular over the past 5 to maybe 10 years maximum or so of removing gluten from your diet, or at least for a certain period of time. I myself, about 20 years ago, just a little bit more than 20 years ago now, went completely gluten-free. And I did that because of SIBO, so small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, food sensitivities to gluten and gliadin, and also candida overgrowth, as well as certain immune-based issues that went along with the chronic fatigue that I suffered from. So I absolutely did it, and it worked great for me. But keep in mind, this was 20 years ago, and going gluten-free meant something very different back then. So what I want to do is I want to actually share with people who don't really know what gluten is in the first place and how it was different 20 years ago than what it is today, and even just like literally over the last year to 2 years, the products that have been coming out. So gluten is simply means this. It is a general name for the protein that's found in wheat. And wheat has many, many different varieties. So wheat could come as a rye, a barley, a triticale, which is a form, or it's a cross between wheat and rye. So it's more of a hybrid-based one. Durum wheat, wheat berries, semolina, spelt, which is more of an ancient wheat or ancient grain. Farro, the same there as well, that they have in Europe. Kamut. There's many, many different types of wheat, but we're looking at all the different forms of gluten-based forms that can contain gliadin and that protein gluten in them. So just a couple examples, meaning like wheat's very, very commonly found in pasta and in bread and in all baked goods like pastries, cookies, those types of things. Cereals, but it's even put in things such as toothpaste and shampoos. It's used as a thickener. And that's the big thing about gluten. And when I say gliadin as well, gliadin is really one of those proteins. Gliadin is the most predominant protein in wheat-based products and gluten-based products. And it would be the equivalent to saying casein is the most abundant protein in milk. There's whey protein, but it makes up a much smaller fraction, about 20%, where casein would actually account for about 80% of the protein molecules in milk. So, and in barley also has gluten. It's found in malt and in beers and in food coloring and in brewer's yeast. Rye is another example. Rye could be rye bread. It could be pumpernickel bread. It could be rye beer. It could be cereal. Triticale, which we just spoke about before, is more like pastas, breads, cereals, anything like that. And one thing I like to caution people about as well is oats. I'm a proponent of oats. I've seen really the health benefits from including oats in people's diet. But of course, we want to make sure that those, if they are having them, and if you're sensitive to gluten, which we're going to talk about in one moment, is that those glutes are certified gluten-free. Because keep in mind, oats are put on a conveyor belt that could have just had any type of wheat-based product. And there's a lot of cross-contamination, whether it's in the air or actually on that conveyor belt or in a manufacturing facility, any one of those things. Typically, I'm just recommending a Bob's Red Mill gluten-free product whenever possible. But again, there are a lot of great brands. Okay. So now we know what wheat is and we know what gluten is, which is essentially just the protein inside of wheat. We want to talk about why people go gluten-free in the first place. Well, there's a few different reasons. Okay. One of them being there's right now about 1 in 1,000 people have some type of food-based allergy. So that's just general over the terms. Now we found over the past couple of years, about 1 in 100 people, about 1% of the population, actually has celiac disease or a celiac-based reaction. And that simply means this, is that through some level of degree of exposure through gluten, they actually have an autoimmune-based response. It's different than what I'm about to talk about, which is a food-based sensitivity. So a food-based reaction would actually be the body, the immune system, not only attacking the gluten-based molecules, but actually moving in through the lamina propria, the wall of the intestine, and doing damage to the intestines as well. That's the basic summary of that. And now they're finding up to 1 in 20 people could have a minor, like a not as transparent food sensitivity to gluten. That means when they eat gluten, they can actually get an inflammatory-based reaction that triggers a real immune-based response for anywhere from 24 to 72 hours or more. And so that means every time they're exposed to gluten, they have a piece of bread, they have a beer, they have wheat-based pasta, any of these things, a cereal, their body has an immune reaction that causes inflammation. Well, that inflammation doesn't just stay in the gut. It could inflame the joints, and it feels like arthritis. It could inflame the nerves, and it flares up MS. It could inflame the body systemically, and Hashimoto's gets exacerbated. So again, it can come out in different ways, but the immune-based response would start in the gut. Now, that's very important to realize and to think about, because now we're looking at about 1 in 20 people can have a real gluten-based sensitivity and not really know it, because they're not just getting the gas, the cramping, the bloating, any of those things. Those people would actually get that from what's called the fructans inside of gluten or inside of the actual wheat-based product. Why? Because wheat-based products also contain fructans, and that's actually a specific type of carbohydrate that yeast and bacteria can feed off of. It's a type of prebiotic that goes into the gut, and yes, good bacteria could feed off of it as well. However, if someone has SIBO or they have IBS, they have a gut dysbiosis, they have candida overgrowth, wheat-based products, not the gluten, but the actual wheat itself, because it contains these fructans, I don't want to get too complicated, would actually then feed that bacteria and allow it to grow. So that's another reason why people are trying to get rid of a lot of these wheat-based products. So now that I've shared with you the sensitivities and what gluten is, I want to now also explain this. 20 years ago, when I really got deep into nutrition because my body was literally dying from the inside out, is that I had to somehow figure out a way that when I ate foods, I just didn't react to everything. One of those ways I had to cut out gluten. Okay, so I had to figure out now, because there's no books. I mean, honestly, 20 plus years ago, hardly any books on what is a gluten-free diet, because it wasn't that popular. But there was a little bit. And so I started to look into it and I say, okay, well, there's rice. Great, I can do rice. I could do oats. So I said, okay, I can do oats. I can do a rice milk. And a lot of products were basically those too. There was hemp and there was those types of things, which were great. But there really wasn't all of the processed gluten-free foods. Meaning there weren't gluten-free muffins. The closest that it got was the gluten-free pizza crust that I've talked about before, which the two ingredients were brown rice and water. And what do? Well, they're basically just cook down rice, roll it out, and there's water mixed with it. That's essentially it. And they made it into a pizza crust. So when you look at that, you'll say, well, what am I really eating for this pizza crust? Okay, the pizza crust itself is I'm eating rice, brown rice, that's basically been rolled out, and it has water. That's it. So when you look at that, I'm really not eating anything bad. I'm simply saying, okay, well, I'm going to have some rice. And as long as you don't have a lectin-based issue with grains, well, there's really no problem with eating rice. Maybe right now, again, as part of your weight loss plan, you're not eating rice. I totally understand that until you reach your goal weight or you're doing a cheat meal or whatever it might be, because there's different parameters. And again, we help people with this all the time. So, and then of course with oats, well, as long as I buy gluten-free oats, then I'm in the clear. And again, as long as I don't have a lectin-based issue to oats or I don't have a food sensitivity to oats, I'm okay. And, in my opinion, the easiest thing to do is to test all of these gluten-free based foods like oats and rice is simply to do a food sensitivity test. You can do this right at home. We'll link it up in the show notes. Simply go to StephenCabral.com/565. And that's today's show notes. And I will link up the food sensitivity test to actually see if you have a subclinical, that means not celiac diagnosed, but actual food sensitivity from an IgG perspective to gluten. And all you have to do is have a little bit of gluten, or I should say wheat-based products, a day or two before you do your food sensitivity test, and you can just test. Very, very simple. Okay, but let's move on. So now what's the difference though? What's the difference between when I was doing gluten-free 20 years ago and what gluten-free is today? And the big difference is that you can now get all of the same products such as breads, cereals, pastries, cookies, muffins, all of these things now gluten-free. So here's the problem that we have to think about right now. Is cereal, bread, muffins, pastries, cookies good for us? They're not, right? Those are processed foods. They're processed, which means they're ground down. A lot of times ground down to a point where they could spike blood sugar levels, and that they've also been processed so much that they're missing a lot of the fiber and the minerals that our body needs to actually get the nutrition from those specific grains. So what I want you to look at is that by going gluten-free, it does not give you free reign of eating muffins, cookies, pastries, cereals, breads, and pastas, because those foods are not the berries and the fruits and the vegetables. They're gluten-free snacks. That's essentially what they are, or they're gluten-free cheat foods. Like, that's basically it. I'm going to qualify all of this in just a moment to let you know which ones are better than others. But I really want you to start to think of it as just because it's gluten-free, it doesn't mean it's good for us. And that's what I really have to teach a lot of times in my practice. They say, oh, well, it's gluten-free. Like, again, like even people in my own family, they're like, well, this muffin's okay because it's gluten-free. I was like, but it's still a muffin. It's a cupcake without the frosting. I mean, that's the difference, really. And they say, I don't understand. I'm like, well, that muffin right there may still have dairy in it and milk, right? And that milk is not going to be the best for you. There could also be sugar in that muffin right there, which a lot of times they do that to make it taste better. And then it very well could be just ground down corn. And maybe it has other ground down grains like potato starch that might not be as good for you, or tapioca starch. So what I ask them is I say, I need you to reframe your thinking to saying, can you still see that food growing in nature? You know, a smoothie is still in nature, meaning like you're blending up those foods, or any snack like that. But is that food seen in nature? And I would say that muffin is questionable at best. And that's because I don't know what went into that. So unless you're baking that muffin yourself, which we'll talk about that in the very end, I don't know that we can call that a good food for you. And I know for sure it will most likely cause weight gain. There's no doubt about that. So I know a lot of people listen to this show for wellness. A lot of people listen to it for weight loss or anti-aging based tips. And some people want all three, and that's great. What I want to share with you, what goes into those gluten-free foods, a lot of times are corn. I don't know if it's GMO corn or not. Does it state it? Yes or no? Tapioca, not my favorite thing because I see it gumming up the intestines a lot as well. And then I see a lot of other people get into potato starches, which again, if it's just white potato, it might spike those blood sugar levels. Soy is in a lot of these products too. And I'm not a huge advocate of soy. Can you have some organic, non-GMO sprouted tofu every once in a while? Sure, as long as that doesn't affect your estrogen levels. Very few people it does. What affects estrogen levels are doing like soy protein, soy milk, really loading up on large amounts of that soy protein, not the bean itself. Okay, a lot of times, again, there's sugar inside of these gluten-free based products. But there's two things that concern me more than that, absolutely more than that. And one is the vegetable oils that go into these things. The safflower oils, or even worse, in my opinion, is the canola oil. When you're putting canola oil into a lot of these baked goods, what you're getting is, when you cook it, a very oxidized polyunsaturated fat. And what that means is that you are basically getting free radical damage inside of your body. You're getting oxidized oil, which creates free radicals. And those free radicals then need to be removed, and you need more antioxidants in your body. But the problem is they're causing damage and they're causing inflammation. And they're also causing, I would say, putrefaction of your cell membranes. And what does that mean? Well, it means that they're actually deteriorating the cell membranes. That means they're not allowing a proper balance with sugars coming in and out of the cells. and they're becoming a little bit too catabolic, a little too flimsy, and they're breaking down faster, which is leading to greater aging in the body. So that is absolutely something that we need to watch out for. And my last point, my very last point, is that a lot of these gluten-free products, you have to just read the labels, that's all, just read the labels, is that they say xanthan gum, or they say some type of gum to make it a little thicker. And the problem with that is this, because remember, the wheat-based products, wheat already has this thing called gliadin or gluten, and it's going to have its own little gummy-based product. But when you start to remove that and you do something like rice flour or one of these other flours as well, or almond flours, I'm not going to even make that. I'm going to make nut flours a topic for a different day because I'm not an advocate of them, but I will talk about those another day. Here's the problem, is that these gums literally can gum up the intestines, and they can cause a dysbiosis of its own. They can cause a constipating based effect, or they can cause an inflammatory based effect. So no one that I'm working with SIBO or Crohn's or IBS, colitis, any of these things, are they using these types of products? At least not initially. That's important. There are a few ones that are okay, no doubt about it. Like guar gum has been shown to be not only okay, it's been shown to be a very healthy prebiotic, but it's a different story. I don't want to start to qualify all these different gums. So very few of the gums, definitely not a xanthan gum, which is the most popular and cheapest. That's why it's used. So not an advocate. So now you know why going gluten-free may not be good for you. One, they're processed foods. They're going to spike blood sugar, potentially, if they're really processed and don't contain the fiber that your body needs. And number two, the products that they use in them are very subpar. So they're using these vegetable oils, which we don't want, and they're using gums like xanthan gum, and they might be using like grains that you just might not want to get a lot of, like just white potato starch or tapioca starch or corn or any of these things. They might not be what we're really looking for. So keep that in mind, because I'm telling you right now, they cause bloating, they cause gas, they cause a lot of issues all on their own because they are hard to digest. It's this conglomeration of all these kind of unnatural things put together. And that's why gluten-free bread isn't necessarily good for you. It doesn't make it a good bread because it's gluten-free. Here are my suggestions, because I always try to give you action tips to walk away with. One is you can test yourself for food sensitivities. Very simple. We'll link that up in the show notes today. And number two, if you're going to do gluten-free, look at the labels and just make sure that there aren't these types of vegetable oils, namely canola oil, and that there isn't xanthan gum in it. And that your starch, so meaning like your grain, your gluten-free grain, is actually coming from something that might have some health benefits, maybe like a quinoa or a bean-based blend or an amaranth, or my favorite is just simply a gluten-free oat, meaning that I like again, there's no partnership or relationship with Bob's Red Mill, but they've been around a long time and they're a nice little employee-owned company and all that good stuff. And they have a gluten-free oats, and they also just have a just plain and simple gluten-free oat flour. That means here's what they do. They take the oats and they grind them down to a powder. It's literally whole grain oats. You get the fiber. It's just ground down. And I've put this up many times, and we'll do it again today. I'm going to link up to my gluten-free pancake, waffle, muffin-based recipe, which is this. I'm just going to tell you out loud legitimately what it is. And it's oat flour. It is your favorite milk or hemp milk, whatever you would like. It's a little sea salt. It is a little bit of baking powder. It is maple syrup as a sweetener. Now, you could use honey, but I like a very natural-based sweetener, not a lot. And you can put in blueberries or blackberries or raspberries or whatever your favorite fruit base is, and you can make that into, you can also use, of course, if you want to for the kids or anything like that, a little bit of organic chocolate chips every once in a while. Now, again, I'm not saying that this is an everyday food, but this is a nice gluten-free alternative that I make probably, I would say, like 3 Sundays a month for my family. And we make the pancakes and all that, and kids love it. You can make muffins out of this recipe, all those things. And again, I'm sure I'm missing a couple things, forgetting a couple things in there. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to link that recipe up today. And so what I'm trying to say to you right now, and just in closing, is that eating a processed food is still a processed food, whether it has gluten or it's gluten-free. It can be made better by actually looking for a whole grain alternative that has the fiber and has all the vitamins, the minerals, and all the nutrition in it, and doesn't have a lot of the polyunsaturated fats, and it doesn't have a lot of the xanthan gums. Those things are not only bad for your health, they will really gum up and they will cause inflammation and issues, digestive issues in the intestines. So hopefully today's episode helped. I'm always happy to do follow-ups and answer more questions that anyone may have. Feel free to go to today's show notes, stephencabral.com/565. I'm going to put my favorite healthy gluten-free recipe in there that you can make all sorts of different varieties out of. And I'm also going to link up that food sensitivity test that we do with kids in my practice, all the way from really, I think like the youngest we've had done is 8 months, all the way up to adults. Of course, it works great for. Take care, everyone. Look forward to speaking with you again tomorrow on our Training Thursday show. Take care. Before you go, I wanted to ask you this question. What if I could teach you in just a couple of hours how to transform your thyroid, hormones, adrenal, cholesterol, blood pressure, blood sugar, weight loss, energy, mood, brain, pregnancy, anti-aging, or many other health-related issues? After 20 years in private practice, after seeing and overseeing 250,000 client appointments, I sincerely feel I have the real-world data and have found the answer you've been searching for. So what I've done is spent hundreds of hours of my own time refining what you need to know in order to uncover your underlying root cause health issues and then begin to rebalance the body and bring it back to a state of robust health and wellness. I'm going to teach you exactly what I do in my private practice so you can understand how you got here and now what you need to do in order to heal. You'll receive all of the important success checklists, protocols, and even ways to customize it to make the program fit your busy life. And you'll get all of this at a fraction of the price. Let me save you the time, money, energy, stress, and frustration of not knowing what to do next. Instead of reading dozens of books on the topic and seeing multiple practitioners, I will condense everything that you need to know in just a few hours of video tutorials that you can watch and listen to anywhere. Together, we will make this healing process an enjoyable one that you can take with you for the rest of your life. I wish you all of the best of health and happiness, and I hope to be able to guide you on your healing journey through my Health Results Accelerators. Simply choose the health imbalance you're currently suffering from, and by the end of today, you'll know what went wrong and how to get well again. I guarantee it. For details, head over now to stephencabral.com/courses.